There are many shooters that use infinite spawn mechanics, but the footage you're going to see here is from a prime example of it. Die Sturmgewehr from Medal of Honor Allied Assault. If only because it's the one that I have installed at the moment. Having enemies spawn infinitely can have several uses. One of the most common is the timed defense mission, where you hold out against an endless procession of foes until a timer runs out. This technique makes sense, as the timer is meaningless if you can simply kill all the enemies before it runs out, and it actually keeps you on the defensive by applying constant pressure upon you to survive from second to second. Another way is to make the spawns conditional on an unfulfilled objective or on a certain condition. For example, if a game is supposed to be about stealth, you can force the player to adopt combat as only a temporary solution by having alerted guards respawn infinitely when killed, forcing you to break contact and hide again. Other times, you may be required to block a passage or means of entry to the level that the horde is using. These are legitimate uses of infinite spawns, and are still effective ways of promoting a certain kind of playstyle, whether that be quick, stealthy, or simply to not die. Less enjoyable ways of using it are like those found in the gameplay you're seeing. Allied Assault liked its escape missions, where you'd infiltrate an enemy installation and then have to fight your way out as an alarm drones on endlessly, and a similarly endless horde of Nazis spawn in front of you no matter where you are, and your only recourse is to keep running forward, soak up bullets, and try to time your reloads properly. Of course, when the spawn points are so close that the enemies are respawning and coming into view faster than you can reload, then it starts becoming a problem. In Die Sturmgewehr, in particular, it is atrocious because they throw a lot of enemies at you at once, and except in open areas like long corridors or courtyards outside, the spawn points are very close to you, which makes the onslaught relentless to the point of being exhausting. Not to mention that the placement of the spawns is grossly unfair. For example, once you exit the underground bunker in Die Sturmgewehr, you have to deal with a constant stream of enemies spawning in front of you and behind you from the bunker you supposedly just cleared your way through, while trying not to get torn apart by the MG towers and hoping that the enemies miss enough for you to get to the next health pack on the other side of the compound without dying. Oh, and of course, there's basically no cover in this level. You have to shoot first, or they're probably going to hit you, and there's only 3 health packs in the whole level. Now on medium difficulty, where they drip feed you the occasional canteen to give you a little health, and it takes 10 rifle shots to kill you, it's frustrating, it is unfair, but it is doable if you slog through it. On hard, it is literally pure luck, because the enemies don't drop any health at all, and you die in 4 shots. It simply doesn't work on hard, and this is the main problem you're going to see with these infinite spawn mechanics. If you're a tank character, it's doable, but if you can't take a hit, the horde of endless foes simply becomes a dice roll, where you either get lucky and don't lose half your health from the next enemy group, or you do, making continuing pointless unless the health kit is right in the next room. It becomes a crap shot trial and error. Call of Duty 2, 4, and World at War also have a bad case of it. But rather than it being a relentless onslaught, it's simply a tedious slog that makes the games more of a chore. In all 3 of these, with 2 setting the precedent, there is in almost every fight a mix of enemies that either don't respawn, that do respawn a set number of times, or that spawn forever until you get close to their spawn point. The mixture differs from shootout to shootout, and truth be told, there aren't that many enemies that truly spawn forever until you move forward. But a trick they do like to play is having the enemies respawn so many times each that if you don't move up, you will be sitting there shooting dudes for 15 to 20 minutes like they want you to be bored if you don't try to play it in any way except as an aggressive rush. Call of Duty 2 in particular, which tends to have larger shootouts than the other two, between larger sets of enemies and allies, as its World War II setting would dictate, does this in pretty much every single fight. If you move up, fights will be over pretty quick. If you sit back and pick enemies off, you'll have to kill many, many, many times more of them before you finally kill them all. There's two problems with this. One is that it's an additional restriction on the player in an already linear game with uncomplicated and unsophisticated combat mechanics. Now, you're trying to get me to engage the enemies in a very particular way, too. You won't even give me the freedom to move and aim and shoot against the enemies in the way I want to. You have to dictate that, too. The other is that, of course, it doesn't work on higher difficulties. When enemy accuracy and damage are so high on Veteran, having to sit back and re-kill the 50 enemies you just picked off because the last 5 headshotted you, or they caught you in a trap with their infamously terrible, endless, and perfectly accurate grenade throws, is not fun. It's a chore. Those 3 CODs are a chore on Veteran for exactly this reason, because of the tediousness of having to pick off so many enemies, while being in danger of being instantly killed at any time during that process and having to redo the whole thing. The lethality also makes the alternative, rush tactics, which you're supposed to be using to stop the spawns, unworkable because you expose yourself and are killed too easily. You have to sit back. So, great. Now your game is just flat out annoying the whole way through instead of fun. Bravo. But this isn't the worst example. I think the worst example I've ever seen of this kind of obnoxious spawn mechanic is Medal of Honor Airborne, where the philosophy is similar to Call of Duty 2, except the spawns actually are infinite. The enemies just keep coming forever until you move up in every single firefight. Combine that with their insanely high accuracy with even the most inaccurate weapons, and you have yourself a perfect setup for trial and error, where you throw yourself forward against your endless hordes of opponents, praying that the random number generator for their accuracy is on your side this time and won't just drop you. That game is bad for many reasons, but those spawns are a really big one. But that's not the most absurd example. The most absurd example I've seen is in the level in Brothers in Arms, I don't remember the name of it, where you have to blow up the anti-glider stakes in the field. And the enemies in those fields respawn infinitely, despite you having to run around in an open field to complete your objectives, and this being a tactical shooter where your health cannot be recovered if lost, and you can't take almost any bullets without dying, and the enemies are all sharpshooters. So you die a lot. It's a lot of trial and error and getting killed in the middle of a field because you have to go out there to blow them up. Or you just sit back and kill tons and tons of enemies until you finally get the timing right on killing them and there's a gap and you can run out and blow up another one, and then you have to run back to cover in order to not get killed by the next group. I cannot tell you why they chose to do that level in that way. It's completely wrong for the kind of game that they were doing, but surprise, surprise, that level sucks. Luckily, most devs seem to have realized this, and in single-player shooters today, infinite spawns are relegated to defense missions, while spawning appropriate numbers of enemies in appropriate places at the appropriate moments in finite amounts without respawns has become a more and more refined design element and is now extremely common. Oddly enough, though, I did recently catch an instance of it. For some reason, there are infinite spawns in the very first shootout of the very first mission of Titanfall 2. As far as I could tell, it was the only time in the game, but it was there. It was obvious. It was plain as day. I don't know why it's there. It's like the old COD gang at Respawn just couldn't quite get it out of their system. Old habits die hard, I suppose. But I don't think anybody's crying that it's dead and buried now. At this point, if you're relying on infinite spawns in order to keep up the pressure on the player, it's because you don't have the skills to properly place an appropriate number and mix of enemies in the appropriate places to give them a consistent challenge without having them respawn.